Today's program, Perspectives on Zoka, Janice Doppler will introduce Zoka, then 6 poets will share their perspectives and read some of their haiku that appeared in Janice's book, One Thread, Zoka and Contemporary Haiku. A few weeks ago, the Haiku Society of America Merit Book Judges chose One Thread as the best anthology category for 2025. Janice and her co-presenters are all members of the Haiku Poets of Northern California. All have published widely, all have won multiple awards. Several were or are editors of journals, members of anthologies, or other projects. Rather than biographies that list those accomplishments for each, here's a bit of that reveals something about the poets behind the poetry. Janice Doppler was fascinated by Chinese philosophy long before embarking on the haiku journey that began when she attended a haiku workshop at the local senior center. She was delighted to discover that taking Basho's advice to follow Zoka, following the creative, linked the two. Mimi Ahern was smitten by haiku when she attended the Yuki-Tiki Haiku Society reading and went on to win the group's Tokotomi Memorial Haiku Contest. Jo Balistreri was a concert pianist who performed Chopin's 24 preludes at age 10. She turned to the music of poetry after an illness took her hearing. Chuck Brickley's first haiku was published in Modern Haiku in 1978. A year later, he became his associated editor and worked closely with Robert Spies. Gregory Longenecker has served as a member of the Touchstone Award Committee and assistant editor of the Living Haiku Anthology. Patricia Machmiller began writing with Kayoshi and Kokyo Tokutomi, who founded the Yuki-Tiki Haiku Society. She collaborated with Fei Uragi to translate Yokio's haiku into a collection titled Yokio's Sky. Ron C. Moss, a volunteer firefighter who lives in Australia, has traveled to New Zealand and the USA to give presentations on his art and poetry. And here's Janice.
First of all, I want to thank Gary and the rest of the leadership team for making space for this program today. It really means a lot to me to be able to talk about it and to have people that work with me on the project. We all worked separately, and yet I could feel the connection between all of us. And so having 7 of us here together is really, really special. So thank you for the space. And today's program will include this introduction, and then each of the 6 co-presenters are going to present for about 5 minutes each, and then we'll do the breakout groups and a whole group presentation. And let me take a second to share this slide. Okay, let me get this out of the way. There are 2 assumptions that are foundational for the presentation today. The first is that humans sense something mysterious that transcends ordinary life. It's ineffable and beyond what can be described in words, but it requires words in order to think or talk about it. The second assumption is that arts of all sorts are vehicles for communicating the mystery. The mystery can be communicated through painting, music, poetry, myriad other creative endeavors, and it can be embodied through the act of creating, whether it's putting pen to paper or paint on a brush, or physical arts such as Tai Chi or dance. My journey with Zoka started with this quote from Basho's travel journal knapsack notebook. Stephen Carter translates Zoka as the creative. And here's the quote, and I don't speak Japanese, and I'm probably going to butcher Japanese when it appears today, and I apologize for that. The waka of Saigo, the renga of Soji, the paintings of Sesshu, the tea of Rikyu. There's one thread that runs through them all. For it's the essence of art to follow the way of creation, taking the four seasons as a companion, follow the creative, get back to the creative. When I came across this particular translation, I already knew that the first hexagram in I Ching is sometimes translated as the creative. And so connecting Basho's advice and my long-term interest in Chinese philosophy lit a fire that's still burning in me. And we'll come back to Basho, but first I want to talk a little bit about what Zoka is. The character on this slide is the same in Japanese and Chinese, and it's a word for the mystery. It's translated as Zoka in Japanese and Zhaohua in Chinese. The character has no direct translation in English. The creative is one way to translate the character, but others such as the Tao, the Wei, or yin and yang are in the same ballpark. So what is Zoka? There are two definitions by two different scholars. One definition is the dynamic spirit that informs the natural world and the inner workings of the cosmos. Another definition is the perpetual emerging, transforming, and returning to the source of everything in the cosmos. The mystery of Zoka is complex, and if it intrigues you and you keep searching, understanding will gradually seep into your heart and into your mind. Zoka is not nature, as in a community of plants and animals, and it's not a deity translated as the creator, and it's not a thing that can be looked for. Think about gravity or electricity or magnetism. They're all difficult to define, but we all understand them through experience. We can experience the effect of electricity and lightning, or gravity in the fall of an apple, or ocean tides. But we don't go on a ginkgo looking for those energies in order to write electricity haiku or gravity haiku. We can experience and write about the effects of Zoka, but I believe that it's a mistake to call haiku that communicates those energies Zoka haiku. And some people have been doing that, and that's a misconception that needs to be created or corrected, I mean. So let's look at Basho's perspective. Basho urged poets to read the Zhuangzi, and that was the place where the term Zoka originated with his work. And the Zhuangzi is a Chinese wisdom text written by a philosopher called Zhuangzi, and it was written about 300 before before the Common Era. The Zhuangzi was popular among Japanese poets of Basho's time. And there's a title that I recommend if you're interested in reading more about this aspect of Zoka. There's a book that I recommend that's on the PDF for the breakouts. Zoka was the focusing theme for Knapsack Notebook, and Basho's awareness of Zoka can be seen in Narrow Road to the Interior, and we're going to look at a few examples. Images that communicate the effect of the energies of Zoka are sprinkled throughout Basho's prose in Knapsack Notebook. And here's just one example. I saw the masterwork of Zoka in beautiful scenes of mountains, fields, and the coast, and following the footprints of devoted travelers who were free of worldly concerns, I came to know the way of a true artist. This translation is by Pepe Q, and the name of her book where this came from is a deep dive into Basho and Zoka and more, and that's also on the handout. Sometimes the transformative energy of Zoka is expressed in Knapsack Notebook as a standalone haiku. And here's one. Petal after petal, mountain roses flutter down, the sound of rapids. On the surface, this one seems like simple description of the scene. But on a deeper level, the fluttering petals are a moment in the transformation from the beauty of the full bloom to the shriveledness and then the decay that's still to come. In the short term, the impermanence of petals compares with the permanence of rapids. In the long term, the water will eventually reach the sea. Petal after petal, mountain roses flutter down, the sound of rapids. Sometimes the prose and haiku work together to communicate the effect of Zoka. The mountain called Hanayama is where hawks are often captured. Just as I was recalling how ancient verse sung of the hawks of Arago, I was deeply moved to discover a lone hawk. Finding it brings such joy at Cape Arago. This haiku, at least as translated, is not the best, but it communicates the wonder of actually seeing a hawk in a place that's famous for hawks. So now we're going to turn from Knapsack Notebook to Narrow Road to the Deep North. Or narrow, I referred to it differently, but you all know it's got different translations of the names. Lonely stillness, a single cicada's cry, sinking into stone. In this haiku, Basho hears the stillness of silence and the movement of the insect's cry. In the shifts between silence and the sound that Basho experiences, he hears the nature's rhythm. Lonely stillness, a single cicada's cry, sinking into stone. Awareness of the beauty and wonder brought about by the transformative energy of Zoka is also sprinkled through the prose in Narrow Road. And here's one example. The sounds of the water, the singing of the birds, and the green pines and cedars are extremely exquisite. The beautiful scene demonstrates the perfection of artistry. How could one not feel joyous for the great accomplishment of Zoka? So Basho encouraged poets to follow the creative, to follow Zoka. But is it relevant for modern poets? To begin to answer that question, I'd like to consider two poets who never mentioned Zoka, and yet the words they used are in the Zoka ballpark. The first is Balistreri. She was active in HPNC, and this quote from an article that she wrote for Geppo, for Yuki Teiki's Geppo, contains what, to me, is a wonderful expression of what Zoka is. I don't know if she ever heard of Zoka, but it expresses it really well. And what she wrote is the experience of a rose is much different than the idea of a rose. Something more than rose is communicated when we open ourselves to what is before us. The significance of the thing is the thing itself, in itself. By reaching out our senses and being receptive to what we see, we participate with nature. The universe is always speaking through its manifold manifestations or its manifold expressions. Meaning is found by looking closely at details, letting each scene, each flower and leaf, each whisper and thunder roll reveal itself in its entirety as its very self. Through observation, we partake in the mystery that is beyond words. One other person that I'd like to touch upon is James Hackett. He was active in the haiku communities of California and the UK. And what he wrote is, I contend that the haiku of Basho and Hackett are sharings of special moments of intuition, which quite mysteriously allow us to experience, often unconsciously, a sense of oneness with nature, an intuition of oneness. To me, Zoka could be substituted for oneness. And Hackett's essay, Suggestions for Creating Haiku Poetry in English, contains advice for that could be helpful for following Zoka, and that essay is included as an appendix in one thread. And wrapping up, what's my perspective? Well, the quote on the left is my personal touchstone for Zoka, and it's from one of David Hinton's books. He's a prolific translator of Chinese wisdom texts and Chinese poetry. And what he wrote was the cosmos seeing itself, the cosmos thinking itself, the cosmos feeling itself. To me, learning to embody this quote is part of how I attempt to follow Zoka. The haiku on the right is mine. Cicadas gazing at the moon, an old monk. To me, the cicadas are gazing at the moon, and so is the monk. Even in their separate gazing, they're interconnected in their gazing. The sound of the cicadas and the sound of the monk while they gaze is a shared experience of Zoka, while also being Zoka. Cicadas gazing at the moon, an old monk. So for the next part of the program, we'll hear from the poets that Gary already mentioned. And each is going to talk for about 5 minutes. And then after that, we'll go into breakout rooms so that you can share your perspectives. And I'll tell you more about how that's going to work after all of the poets have to do the thing. And by the way, the commercial that always comes, One Thread's available on Amazon. So let me stop the sharing. And our first poet today is Patricia Machmiller. And in her essay, Wonderment, Patricia wrote, my guide during my 49-year journey of writing haiku has been the seasons. Without knowing the concept of Zoka, through a process of discovery using seasons as my North Star, I have uncovered its power. So Patricia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Janice. And thank you for inviting me to talk today and read my haiku. Nice to see everybody. I'm so happy to be here. And as Janice said in her introduction, I do think nature is a wonder. And haiku has become a way of expressing that wonder and also expressing my gratitude for the natural world. This focus on nature in my writing comes through use of the season word, which has been very important to me. And as I came to understand how the seasons resonated in my life, and I came to understand that was a deep resonance for all of us in our humanness, and that when we go to nature, we are changed. And the cyclical nature of the seasons makes what we consider to be a singular moment, it turns it into an eternity. So with those kind of thoughts in mind, I'll read you some of my haiku. Hydrangea. Over tea, mulling the idea of utopia. Hydrangea. Over tea, mulling the idea of utopia. In the growing heat, the garden becomes quiet, as if listening. In the growing heat, the garden becomes quiet, as if listening. Beyond the rainbow, who'd have thought there'd be barbed wire there? Beyond the rainbow, who'd have thought there'd be barbed wire there? Detour to white sands, a scorched sunflower faces the colorless sky. Detour to white sands, a scorched sunflower faces a colorless sky. Shooting star, an arrow into autobiography. Shooting star, an arrow into autobiography. Milky Way, a communal reading of the Odyssey. Milky Way, a communal reading of the Odyssey. Kitchen faucet, the drip, drip, drip of winter moonlight. Kitchen faucet, the drip, drip, drip of winter moonlight. Underwater canyon, in the shape of night, a whale comes. Underwater canyon, in the shape of night, a whale comes. The whole of history in an appendix. Autumn wind. The whole of history in an appendix. Autumn wind. Thank you.
And what I'm going to do today is leave, after each poet, I'm going to leave just a little bit of silence before moving directly into the next person. And our next presenter will be Greg Longenecker. Greg's essay, Odd Habits, explored how he moves through his day, observing the world around him and writing haiku. So, Greg, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Janice, for the project. Thank you, HPNC, for inviting me to be here today. I'm going to talk about one haiku. It's taken from the lead essay that I wrote, which is basically a haibun. And I just want to say a word about Zoka and Zohua, and that is, I think of it constantly as change and transformation. Change and transformation. And the one haiku I'll talk about, I like to do this as it's a kind of a game for me when I'm trying to understand a haiku. I like to take the first word and the last word. That way I'm getting something from the very beginning of the haiku, the very end, the juxtaposition between those two. So the first word in this one is forgetting. And the last word is breeze. Forgetting why I stepped outside, balmy breeze. Forgetting why I stepped outside, balmy breeze. Now, in California, in the summertime, we get a lot of breezes because of our cool water on the coast and our warm water inland, our warm land inland. And so this interaction is a constant change that's going on. In this case, a balmy breeze is a summer breeze. And when I wrote this poem, I was living in the hills above the Pasadena, above the Rose Bowl. And so that breeze coming in from the coast, coming into the Rose Bowl, coming up the hillside, going past the trees and the houses, coming up to my driveway where I just stepped outside the house. And that breeze changed again, by the way, when it touched me. It was no longer any of those things that it had been before, where it was changing constantly. It had to go past me, around me. For me, it also touched me inwardly. All of my senses overwhelmed by this feeling of a balmy breeze. For a moment, I had no idea who I was. I actually made a kind of a half turn towards the ravine where the breeze was coming up, because I felt like I was greeting some sort of friend, somebody, something I knew. My body relaxed. I just felt very nice and relaxed for a moment. My brain was not working. There was no Greg Longenecker. There was no I. There was no me. There was just this feeling. And while I stood there with this feeling, I thought later I need to record that. How do you record a feeling that has no name? And so I began with the breeze and worked from there. And how I had forgotten something. I had forgotten me. I'd forgotten what I was all about. To this day, I can't remember why I went out to that garage. I know intellectually I went back into my house and tried to reconstruct, and eventually remembered something that I had to do out in the garage. But I don't remember that. What I remember is that moment of completely losing myself in the moment. It's a Zen moment. It was an aha moment. How can I say what that is? I can't. All I can do is kind of hint at it. And that's what this haiku is. Forgetting why I stepped outside. Balmy breeze. Thank you.
Our next reader is Joe Balistreri, who needs to unmute. And Joe, in her essay, One of 10,000 Things, Joe wrote, I recognize Zoka as the music of the universe, the vibrations that register for me as sound. And Joe, it's all yours, except you're still muted.
Nothing happens.
There you are. There you
Okay. All right, that might have been a Zoka moment
are.
because everything was flowing and I had no sense of anything at all. Thank you, Janice, and thank you everyone for making space for this wonderful book that Janice has put together of one thread. I'm so happy to be part of it and happy to be here. I will start with my first one, which is a foghorn's wail. Sheeted in thick mist, iron ore ships. The foghorn's wail, sheeted in thick mist, iron ore ships. I feel that I was born into movement and sound. The mists were ever changing. There was a dialogue constantly of not only music in my home, which of course you can't grab a hold of. It moves along. It's flowing. You can't hold mist. You can't hold big ships coming through. Water is always moving, never stops. And my grandparents would teach us that everything had a voice. For instance, when I get to the next haiku, crackle speak, curls of whittled cherry wood, feed Grandpa's fire. We said, Grandpa, what is that? What is that noise, that crackle? And Grandpa said, that's the voice of the fire. And you listen to that because that voice is as important as your voice. So we were all together and everything. And as Greg mentioned, when I was watching the ships or out in the day with the mist, with the fire, there was no concept of I. There was a oneness for lack of anything else. Everything was always transforming. And I think the only clue I had for anything was joy. There was just this joy. And so those are the kinds of haiku I chose. Winter hills, with each boot crunch, scent of sage. Winter hills, with each boot crunch, scent of sage. I'm probably out of line here. The clickety-clack of Grandma's treadle, falling snow. The clickety-clack of Grandma's treadle, falling snow. And I'll read Crackle Speak one more time. Crackle Speak. Curls of whittled cherry wood, feed Grandpa's fire. Thunderstorm, through the car window, a flash of forsythia. Thunderstorm, through the car window, a flash of forsythia. His sunlit smile, the swish and smack of feeding carp. His sunlit smile, the swish and smack of feeding carp. Cloudless sky, cloudless day. A jay brings into the sky, into the lilacs. Cloudless day, A jay brings the sky into the lilacs. Flag wrapped casket. The diminishing skirl of bagpipers. Flag wrapped casket. The diminishing skirl of bagpipers. Wild strawberries, the skim and dart of white butterflies. Wild strawberries, the skim and dart of white butterflies. Hornet swarm, sound of coming cold under the shutters. Hornet swarm, sound of coming cold under the shutters. The crest and trough of silver grasses. Hurricane wind. The crest and trough of silver grasses. Hurricane wind. The polished darkness of her piano, touching keys into music. The polished darkness of her piano, touching keys into music. Thank you.
Our next presenter is Chuck Brickley. In his essay, The Stuff of Life, Chuck wrote,
I finished my piece, but we
Perhaps-
still have to do the Zoom reading rooms.
listen to those.
Mhm. You can listen to this too.
Okay, let me start that again. In Chuck's essay, The Stuff of Life, Chuck wrote, perhaps Zoka is akin to the stuff of life, an elusive yet unmistakable quality I find inspiring in the haiku of others and seek to capture in my own. Chuck, take it away.
Well, thank you, Janice. And thank you for putting this anthology together and for helping me and many others become more aware of Zoka, or the creative, and haiku. And congratulations for the HSA Merit Book Award. Great
Thank you.
news. I hope you won't mind too much a story I'm going to share here shortly. A story about my unlucky 13th haiku. But first, my focus today is on one aspect of Zoka, its potential for unpredictability, the surprise element. Just when you think something's going one way, it zags. Foxglove. A bumblebee bounces off a bumblebee backing out. I wrote a lot of backyard haiku during the pandemic, and that's one of the ones that's stuck around. Foxglove. A bumblebee bounces off a bumblebee backing out. The next haiku happened, as I recall, when I walked into our kitchen and stopped to admire a bowl of fruit. Still life. A fruit fly switches peaches. Or then again, maybe it was a painting I saw at the De Young Museum. Still life. A fruit fly switches peaches. Now for that story I promised. At the beginning of this one thread project, Janice asked each poet to submit 12 haiku. I made a list of 30 or so and then narrowed it down to 13. Unable to decide which one to drop to get to my goal of 12, I moved on to making a list of the publishing credits for all 13 poems. Come the deadline, I eeny, meeny, miny, mowed, deleted the unlucky one, and rushed off the remaining 12 in an email to Janice. When I received my copy of the anthology last year, this wonderful anthology, One Thread, I noticed something strange about my section. It had 12 haiku and 13 credits. That 13th haiku, the one I had deleted, in the rush, I forgot to delete its publishing credit. Like a weed growing through a crack in the sidewalk, my poor, unlucky 13th haiku forced a little bit of itself into the anthology after all. Meta Zoka. So, how can I not read this haiku today? How can I not let nature take its course? Let Zoka do its thing. Roadmap. An apple thumps off the hood. Roadmap. An apple thumps off the hood. Thank you.
Our next presenter is Mimi Ahern. In Mimi's essay, Playing with Watercolor, she wrote, "As I understand Yang, it's on my daily ginkgo that I fill my senses with the world, the creative source around me. What I have experienced will be released into the art of my haiku. My understanding of yin is the response of the creative spirit into art." So, Mimi, I'd love to hear your part today.
Thanks, Janet. And I'd like to thank Janice for her 2 podcasts that were on Patricia McGuire's Poetry P podcasts. She drew me into Zoka by her warmth and clarity of explaining this concept. And I would also like to thank her for her help with my essay in One Thread. I was kind of stuck, and she said, "You know, Mimi, you might consider color. You seem to use a lot of color in your haiku." That sparked my thinking about Zoka and color. She's right. It's how I see the world. I see it through color. And it's this love of color that draws me into the world of nature and the ever-changing seasons of the flowers and the trees, of the sea and sky. So, what is my understanding of Zoka? It's best described through a little tree. That's what I write about in my essay. And before I read the section, I'll describe the moment. It's January after a hard night's rain. The sun is out on my morning ginkgo, and there, just around the corner from my house, I'm stopped cold by the tiniest buds, jet black and shining in the leftover rain. These are the words in the book. There is a magic in the eastern redbud's abracadabra of tiny jet black buds clustering into fuchsia, then exploding into pink petals. Right before small heart-shaped red leaves appear and then transform into green, then red again, before falling to the ground golden. I had never noticed that tree before, but from that day forward, I visited that tree every morning. I've visited it for the past 10 years, checking to see what it's been up to. In Janice's book on page 219 are Hackett's 18 suggestions for creating haiku poetry in English. This is number 16. Work on each poem until it suggests exactly what you want others to see and feel. Well, I'm still working on a haiku that captures that moment 10 years ago, and it keeps eluding me. So I will share 4 other haiku, 3 that are in the book. Bare Orchard, the sunlit beige of filigreed branches. This moment after holidays in San Diego, driving through withered fields, suddenly the sun through a cloud. And this next one, winter rain stops. Chartreuse ginkgo leaves finger the sky. I'm lucky to live on a street lined with ginkgo trees. Every autumn they turn golden. The grace of this leaf that falls from the ginkgo tree, joining the others. That haiku shortly after my husband's death and after I had started writing haiku. And this last haiku, Black Oak, the razzmatazz of bare branches. I'm treated to this scene driving from San Jose to San Francisco when our winters are alive with green hills. And visualizing that green, I revised it yesterday. A black oak on a green foothill, razzmatazz of bare branches. And there you go. Zoka, the ever-evolving transformation of a haiku. So thank you, HPNC. Thank you for Faye Zooming, the board who schedules these wonderful get-togethers, and to everybody that comes, and to Janice for putting this wonderful book together. Congratulations, Janice, on your award.
Thank you. Our last presenter today is Ron C. Moss. In Ron's essay, Stillness of Mind, he wrote, "We're part of the universe, which, by its very nature, is creating in every moment of time." Ron went beyond words to communicate Zoka in his painting, Symphony of Creation, which is the cover that he created for One Thread. So, Ron, it's all yours.
Thanks very much, Janice. Lovely to be here and to see you all. It's a wonderful occasion and well worth getting up at 5 a.m. in the morning on a Monday. So if I sound a bit croaky, I'm probably still half asleep, but anyway. Such a wonderful event, and congratulations, Janice, and all the contributors to this beautiful anthology, to the award. Yeah, look, I had lots of different ways I might approach my sort of reading, and I guess for me, when I found out what this term was, I've got a whole library haiku books and Eastern philosophy books, but somehow the term Zoka or the concept of Zoka had eluded me up till now, even though I've probably spent the last probably 40 or more years writing and creating art, and at least the last 30 writing haiku. And very much the way of practice for me is doing this. And so it was just so wonderful to come across this concept and be introduced to it by Janice. And I think it just encapsulates so much my own journey over many, many years. So what I'd like to do is just read a few of my haiku. And I might start in my essay. I did have a couple of quotes, and one of them that I really love by Sufi poet Rumi. Let the waters settle and you will see the moon and the stars mirrored in your own very being. And to me, that's the cosmos is just, I had thought about it the other day that you have to have the whole cosmos and the whole universe to exist, for each of us to exist, because we couldn't exist without that. And so we're not separate from it. We are it. I saw something the other day. For me to be here, there had to be over 1 million or probably thousands of relatives over the decades and centuries. So when I look out into the universe and the stars and the night sky, I don't feel small and insignificant. I feel totally connected because there's nothing that's outside of me. And I think that's a wonderful realization. So if I can just start with some haiku. Meditation, deep in the white forest, the sound of frost. Meditation, deep in the white forest, the sound of frost. That haiku, probably more than any other, has that deep feeling of meditation for me. Mars rising, unknown footprints in the sand. Mars rising, unknown footprints in the sand. What could be more cosmic than that? The depth of heat in the yellow song of a sunflower. The depth of heat in the yellow song of a sunflower. You'll see that I also love colour all the way through my haiku. Cosmic dust, the feel of another's pulse in mine. Cosmic dust, the feel of another's pulse in mine. Star glow, pieces of whalebone worn smooth. Star glow, pieces of whalebone worn smooth. My breath, the gentle sway of a life. My breath, the gentle sway of a life. Moonlit snow, the sound of emptiness in the world. Moonlit snow, the sound of emptiness in the world. And to finish, starry night, what's left of my life is enough. Starry night, what's left of my life is enough. Thank you, everyone.
Janice, could I ask if it's appropriate to show the painting that Ron did, and Ron, could you talk a moment about the painting? I'd be so curious.
It's probably come out in reverse, I suppose, but It's actually on my screensaver, so I could probably just quickly share my screen.
And okay, good. It's
Can you
fast.
see that?
No, it just says that you've started screen sharing. There it is.
Oh, oh,
Yeah,
that's
so what it
beautiful.
was I'd done several watercolors and just using the wet on wet technique of wetting the paper first and then loading the brush with a lot of color and then just moving it around on the paper. And I think I also threw some salt on it, which you get those little speckly bits. And then I also put in some land masses, a little bit of tree, a tree down the bottom that you might not be able to see. So I guess for me, it was just that sort of wonderful feeling of color and movement, which I love about watercolor. It just allows that to happen it's not controlled at all, really, watercolor. It's a bit like life. You sort of put your input in here, here and there and hope for the best and a little bit of skill, but a lot of luck. And things sometimes turn out pretty good. So yeah, I think that's a lot like life. Yeah, just stop here. Yep.
Thank you for sharing that, Ron.
Oh, thanks for asking. Yeah, thank you.
Sometimes I just hold the book and look at the picture. It's because I mean, really, it's just so beautiful. And I didn't want I didn't want to have words on it be too big. Ron and I talked about how to minimize words, but to let the art speak for itself and to show through. Today, as I listened to all six presenters, what I kept feeling was that I wanted it to stop so I could dig into the book, into each person's poetry, and obviously I didn't want to really make it stop. But so what I decided what I'm going to do after this is posted online is I'm going to go in and go to each poet, just pick a day and pick one poet and listen to just that person's part of today, and then read their poems and read their essay and just sit with one poem so that it's a way of making it stop, because what each poet talked about today found was moving for me. And I want to say one thing about overall the haiku that were in the book. You know how it goes when you submit. Usually an editor will say submit, X number of poems, and I'll pick my favorite. But in this case, I wanted the poets' voices to shine through. I didn't want my voice to shine through. And it was a risk but I asked everybody submit 12 and order them in the way you want them ordered, and that's the way they came through in the book, so that people's own views were as loud as possible. So thank you to all of you for participating today.